Just as we set goals and look ahead to start a new year, so do our local leaders. Shawnee County District Attorney Mike Kagay is here with an update on a few things that you have going on in the year ahead. Welcome to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Great to be back.
Well, let's look back, first of all, over the past several years, because we visited before. First of all, we had the pandemic, and we were catching up on a backlog from that. Right. Then we had the judicial cybersecurity incident of late 2023. We were catching up from that. Where do we stand right now in getting rid of those backlogs and really focusing on new cases that come in?
Don't forget construction in the courthouse, because that's been going on for a couple years now. So we've had a lot of interesting challenges present themselves, things outside of our control. And what I tell my staff, what I tell my team is, let's stay focused on our responsibility. Our core function is to prosecute cases, right? To treat defendants fairly and meet our victims with empathy and follow the law and apply it here impartially in Shawnee County. And I feel like, and I believe that we've really done a fair and consistent job of that through all of this. And the best way to reference that is to actually look at numbers and metrics. And I can tell you, we looked back at last year, and our major felony unit, which handles all the most serious offenses you can consider. Most of our cases don't end up going to jury trial, but we have hundreds of serious felonies that get committed here in Shawnee County every year. A small percentage of them end up going to jury trial. We actually had 17 go, and of those 17 jury trials, we obtained convictions in all 17. And that tells me a couple things. That tells me that the team that I have in place is doing their job very well, but it tells me the partnerships we have with law enforcement are working at a high level, and it tells me the community is engaged in a really meaningful way, because anytime law enforcement begins an investigation, it's in response to a community outreach, right? And at the end of the day, when these cases go to jury trial, it is the community sitting in the jury box which ultimately determines that outcome.
And that is what we're talking about. And so
Yes.
You want to have the right tools to be able to prosecute those law-abiding citizens who maybe aren't obeying the law,
Yes.
living by the same rules and regulations that the rest of us would think would make a good citizen. And so the legislature is here. Anything that you want to ask of them this session?
Yes, actually a few things, but which is not unusual for me. But this year in particular, my focus is on a bill around the purchase of sex. And so if I asked you if purchasing sex was a crime here in Kansas, you would probably say yes, it is. And you'd be right. But if I asked you if it was a felony, what would you say?
You would think it's a serious offense, but you're going to tell me it's not. So
well, it's not a felony yet, and so the purpose of the bill is to make it a felony. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to deter this kind of conduct. We don't want people buying sex, because when you come in and you buy sex, what are you doing? You're creating a marketplace for people that sell sex. And the studies, including by the Department of State, tell us that 60 to 80% of the people selling sex are actually sex traffickers, which we know to be people who will abuse others and force and coerce them into performing these sex acts, right? And so we have really strong penalties to hold the sex traffickers accountable, but we don't even have a felony to prevent people from buying sex. You got to be convicted of it as a misdemeanor and then do it again to make it a felony. And so why is this important? Well, we want to cut out the demand. We don't want sex traffickers coming to Kansas to set up shop, right? But the buyers keep buying. And so we have to enhance those penalties, and there's also provision there for education, right? Because a lot of this is just ignorance, they don't know. And that's half the benefit of making it a felony, because as you said, when it's a felony, everyone knows we're taking this seriously.
And so that is one thing that you'll be asking of the
Yes.
legislature. I was asking you prior, there are a lot of national headlines right now about what's happening with immigration enforcement, what perhaps local law enforcement's role might be in any of that. Your office and any sort of involvement that you have or any directives you currently have regarding immigration and offenders who may or may not be in our community.
Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience, I have never received any kind of direction or request from the federal authorities related to the immigration issue specifically. What we talk about in terms of just communication, we'll have an offender maybe committing a serious felony who flees our jurisdiction, and goes outside of the United States, usually to Mexico. And we have had times where the federal authorities are the ones that track them down and bring them back here to face justice here in Shawnee County. I've also sent people to prison and noted, while I was making the arguments to send them to prison, there was an agent from ICE who was observing the proceedings, because if that person did not go to prison, right, they were there and prepared to take them.
Okay, so your role is justice for local citizens.
Correct.
Mike Kage, a lot going on. Keep us up to date on what is happening throughout the year. Appreciate catching up with you.
I will. Thanks,
Thank
Melissa.
you. We are